On this week's Red Dead 2 o'clock, we've been hands-on with the game. Missions, side activities and the open world all discussed. Plus, little details that you won't find anywhere else. It's all here on this week's Red Dead 2 o'clock. Hello and welcome to this special report of Red Dead 2 o'clock. Yes, it's taken us 6 days to go off the schedule of 2 PM on Fridays, but we hope you'll agree it's going to be worth it because we have seen and played the game. My name is James and joining me today is my co-host Dan Dawkins.
Hello there.
So yes, special episode. We've played the game, we've seen a couple of missions, we've seen the open world. It's incredible, there's loads to talk about. I've got about 10 pages of notes. I guess before we get into it, the main thing people want to know up top is what's it like and is it good?
Yeah, I'll address that. Now, I will hold my hands up and say I'm not the biggest historical Red Dead Redemption fan. I didn't entirely get on with the previous game, and I know that sounds insane for the host of a Red Dead show, but I want to be really transparent about it. I'm a much bigger Grand Theft Auto fan. So I approached this with an open mind, because obviously it looks incredible, and some trepidation, because I was worried about how they pack the world, how they would make it work, would it be exciting? Long story short, Red Dead Redemption 2 is spectacular. It's the scale, but not just the scale as in it's large, even though it is large.
It is massive.
Probably even larger than even we'd comprehended, which is quite a statement in itself. What's more large about it is the depth. And I think that the depth is staggering. I think the level of moment-to-moment interaction and options is a blowaway. Be that, the not infinite, but, what feels like a staggering number of ways. You could even customise your beard, your moustache. Do you trim it in one of 20 ways? Do you pomade it? Do you flick it up? Your beard. Every building you visit, you can open drawers, go in cupboards, you find collectibles. Let's say you do find tonics, pomades, items. They're not just cosmetic, they have some effect in the world. And it might be tiny, it might be to do with your health, your stamina, it might upgrade or, fill up your Deadeye bar. Everything's teeming with activity and things to do. You go to a riverfront, you see a fish, you can shoot the fish with your arrow, you can shoot your fish with a pistol. Everything feels like there's something to do in it. Two big takeaways for me that maybe I wasn't expecting, but when you see them, you start to appreciate them. One is this incredible rolling sense of nature. So I talked on the last show about, the thrill for me was finding a huge open hillside, watching a sunset, sat there on my Shetland pony.
With your Shetland.
Now, I didn't find a Shetland pony, but what you do really feel in the game is this incredible sense of like an organic environment. Mm. So, we'll talk more about this in depth as we talk about what we saw, but, the game opens in snow, and not just like snow as we've seen it in video games before, dense snow. And this was playing on PS4 Pro in 4K and HDR. So the snow you can see in the background, it comes in these kind of almost intangible, wispy, thick vapor clouds. And the darkness of the sky, it's like real life. When it's going to snow and you're like, oh my God, it's going to be like a biblical style snow. You can feel it. But then as you progress along the environment, the way it starts to break up, like the way the snow will suddenly show patches of green flicking through, there'll be a slightly pinprick break in the clouds, the sun will filter through, and then you go from that to, for example, in nighttime, like an almost Instagram perfect cosmic sky that you only get when you're in the open world, like in real life. If you ever go camping or you ever get off grid, when you haven't got any sort of ambient city light, that light you only get from the stars, and they're all accurate constellations.
Yeah,
it's staggering. And then even more so, the weather. I've never been so pleased to see rain in a game.
And wind.
The wind. Here's a statement. Red Dead Redemption 2 has the best wind in any video game ever. Why do I say that? Because when the wind blows and it howls from left to right or whatever it is, you can see the lead character's hair blows to the side.
Yeah.
The hair blows to the side. You can see debris and sort of flotillas of stuff fly past in the background. There's just all these tiny little details that make the world feel alive. So irrespective of kind of what you're doing in terms of the depth and the interaction and the picking up and the chasing and the shooting, the world is alive. And that just makes it feel so exciting.
Yeah.
So exciting.
I think there'll be so many different stories coming out of it and so many different ways to play a certain mission or do a certain thing, that when you're sitting or talking to friends or anyone else who's played it and you're talking about a mission that you've done, your tale of how that mission went will probably be, like, there'll be key beats in it, but the actual things around it will be different completely to anyone else's experience. So you're actually telling your own story in this amazing world that's just living and being created for you. So let's talk about the demo. So in this episode, we're going to briefly talk about, I say briefly, it might last a long time, about what we saw and what we didn't see, which we'll get onto later on. We're going to talk about the missions, the open world, the environment, and then tomorrow, don't worry, there will also be another show tomorrow, Fridays at 2 p.m, like we said last week, which will probably be more of a Q&A episode. So anything that you hear in this episode that you want to know more about, or if there's a topic you specifically want us to deep dive into, let us know in the comments, let us know on Twitter, let us know on the GTA forums. Put all your questions in there. We'll try and get to them all tomorrow and in future episodes. So, first off, a bit of background. If you're going to read any other previews or watch other videos from people who might have seen this demo, then you'll probably have already come across some of this stuff, but we are going to talk about a few missions and how it relates to the wider story. So if you want to stay completely, utterly spoiler-free, well, I mean, it's too late because you've watched all the trailers and everything, but we're going to talk about a couple of those elements. So from the top, I think it's worth mentioning, as we were talking about, this is like a dynamic demo, so everyone might get a slightly different take on what happened in it. Like, so our experience will be different from one of our colleagues. Rachel also saw the demo, which we'll try and get her on the show at some point, so she'll probably have a different take on how things worked to us, but this is what we saw. So as we've previously said, it's 1899, the gang is at the peak of its notoriety. Arthur is there. He's very loyal to Dutch. He's been introduced into the gang from a very young age after the death of his father. So him and Dutch have quite a strong bond. But the whole game is taking place sort of in the final period of this sort of outlaw era. The demo opened shortly after a botched heist in Blackwater. And we didn't get to see the heist, and we'll talk about more of that later. And then the gang flees off through the mountains, and some of the gang members have been killed, which has started to cause a few ripples in the camp about why is everyone doing this? All these people are dying, we're shooting innocents. Like, how are we going to resolve this? And of course, they need money.
Well, the game that we saw began with John Marsden, hero of the original Red Dead Redemption, lying on a camp bed. His eye is covered, as if he's had a really serious eye injury. He's lying there, he's feeling quite sorry for himself, being overlooked by his colleagues. And then Abigail Marsden, his wife, comes in and seems obviously pretty angry with him because he's got himself into a load of trouble. She's very headstrong and basically says, the boy wanted to see you. Now, the boy being, John Marsden's son. Players of the original Red Dead will be aware of the added significance of that. And the boy essentially just stands there and wants to see his father. Abigail gives him a pretty tremendous scolding for being a fool. We're saying I only came in because I hoped you were dead, which is a great loving relationship.
Yeah.
But eventually, what migrates from this is Dutch van der Linde comes out and essentially says, we have to have money to survive as a gang. We're licking our wounds, but we can't just sit back. We've got to do this job. So he's arranged essentially a train heist. So he takes the entire gang or posse together, and you have to go. And this is characters like Bill Williamson, the ex-military guy who Rockstar described as like not the sharpest tool in the box, but definitely quite a handy weapon, inverted commas, to have around. And then from that point, you go from like a cutscene to your first playing part of the game, though interestingly this is also kind of a cutscene, which is an interesting new dynamic they've added. I'll let James talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, so we're off, we've left the camp, we're riding down the mountains, down these snowy mountains that Dan described earlier, overlooking a train track where the trains are going to come. But on that journey, you're on your horse, you can hold X to keep your horse going at a certain direction. I think there were about 6 different horse speeds. There's a couple of trots, some canters, some gallops. So you tap it to make your horse go faster, or you hold it in to go at that certain speed. But while you're doing that, you can hold in the trackpad button on PS4, and as you do so, some widescreen bars like slowly close in on the action.
They descend in on the screen. You hold the trackpad and you see like a wheel fill up. Once you've filled the wheel, the bars become locked. So you view the real-time action as if it was a cutscene with a degree of interaction.
Yeah.
So you keep X held down to stay with the gang, but you can also pop R3, and that will give you different panoramic, really attractive camera angles on the interactive cutscene. It works surprisingly well, and actually is a great way to make long rides feel more dynamic.
Yeah, they definitely do. And I think it's the cinematic mode is like akin to the GTA 5 mode when you had the cinematic camera, but it was obviously like really hard to drive with the cinematic camera because you just end up like not knowing which way was left half the time and smashing into buildings. But this way, you're on a path. If you hold X, your horse will just follow that path.
Yeah, if you set a waypoint on the map and you're in cinematic mode, it will essentially, just holding X will make you, your horse will steer as if on invisible rails.
Yeah. So as we're on our way down to the train track, the Dutch is giving everyone jobs. So everyone has little jobs. And the mission is basically explained during the journey. There's no text on screen or any kind of HUD markers. It's just like a very dynamic thing.
It's something to note throughout the game is the HUD is almost completely minimal.
Yeah.
You can press down on the D-pad to kind of expand the HUD. And then you have different options for making your main, I guess, mini-map radar. And if there's a very few tiny health icons that sit above, there's 5 icons that sit above the main mini-map. From left to right, I think it's your health, stamina, dead-eye gauge, and then the horse also has a health and stamina rating. And we'll talk more about the importance of the horse and the bond and the things the horse can do as we go on. But there's also your honour bar, which again we'll talk about in depth later on. But that is, which side of the virtue or outlaw scale you're riding to, and that's visible. But it's also possible to have a completely nude HUD, so it's just you and the environment.
So we're on our way to this train track. The train is coming from Big Valley, so we get down to the train tracks, and the music starts playing. It's the same composer from Red Dead 1,
yes.
Woody Jackson, and this time there are 192 separate pieces of original score in the game.
It's really clever because there's 192 tunes. They will dynamically interlap to relay the tension of the moment. So I guess you've got some will feel more when you're calm and you're in a town and there's no guns being fired. There'll be like serenity. But in moments like this, it's obviously about tension and creating a mood. So you'll get this beautiful organic segue between the different tonalities. It's really, really good.
So once we get down to the train tracks, Bill's there, as you mentioned. He's setting the explosives. We have a little chat to him, and he tells us to go and connect the fuse to the explosives. That isn't actually marked like on screen. He just says, here's the wire, go and connect it to the thing, and you just have to walk over and find where it is. And then you go back up to join the gang on the top of the mountain. The train comes along, Bill pushes the plunger, and nothing happens. Because he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, he's done something a bit wrong, and the train trundles by, which leads to Arthur and a couple of other members of the gang running across the tunnel and jumping onto the train to try and stop it.
Yeah, you have to instantly, there's a sort of changeover cutscene where they realise what's gone wrong, and before you know it, you're having to hammer X to run up the ridge. You leap onto the train dynamically. I think 3 of you make the leap. One of the guys instantly bounces off the roof to the side. Your other colleague makes it, but is hanging off the rail on the side. So your first action essentially is in real time to walk over and hike him up. I think you hammer X and he lifts him up to the train itself.
Yeah, so then you guys are on top of the train. You have to make your way through the train. There's a seamless transition from being outside the train to going inside the train carriages, and the train carriages are really detailed and ornate. It's quite a fancy train. There's lots of nice sofas around and things on shelves, and obviously baddies. So this is the first time when you see Deadeye, which has returned, obviously. So that works in very much the same way. You pick your targets and then you fire off a load of shots at the enemies. So then we get into the main train, and this is when you start to see a couple of things popping up on screen which are interesting, like your compendium gets updated. So when you find things in the world, you get this massive compendium of plants and animals and weapons and ammo and everything that's all logged in this book every time you find it. So completing that book is going to be one heck of a task.
Oh, crikey.
So we get to the front of the train and manage to make it stop.
Yeah, you manually yank the handbrake after you kill basically almost everyone on board.
But not everyone.
Yeah, not quite everyone. So obviously you bundle out of the front. Then it turns out that there's loads of guards in the carriages you've missed. They start piling out. So the train is now static, kind of on the right-hand side of you. To the left is like, open scrubland with a few rocks and some places for cover. So what ensues then is like a mass shootout between you and I think actually more of your gang charge in, don't they?
Yeah.
So it becomes a huge all-hands shootout. And this is where your dead-eye mechanic becomes absolutely invaluable. So whether you're using your pistols or dual-wielding your pistols or using your rifle, what you'll sometimes get, we got our first glimpse of the new dynamic kill cams. So what it basically does is cuts away to the guy in question taking a bullet in the head, arm, leg. What's even more interesting about the dynamic kill cams is they will change to reflect your level of honour. So if you play the game in a virtuous way, the kill cams, the slow-mo nature of them will be heroic. So your character's shooting will be framed in a way, where it's very sort of classic Western Eastwood style. But if you're a bad person, the kill cams will err to becoming more grisly, like you're a bad person, and you can see in the actions of the kill cam that wasn't a cool thing.
Yeah, it's a lot more brutal and messy.
Yeah.
If you're being dishonourable.
Yeah.
So we've stopped the train, we've shot all the bad guys.
Yeah.
We still need to get the bonds off the train, which is like the money that we need. This is the section that we've seen in some screenshots and some trailers before, with Dutch around the train carriages.
Listen to me. We don't want to kill any of you. But trust me, we will. Wake them up a little!
So we blow a hole in the door, we go inside this, again, another lovely ornate carriage, start picking things up. There's loads of things to pick up in the carriage, and everything you pick up has a different animation. Like, you don't just see them going, oh, that's a cloth and that's a book. Like, he actually physically picks it up and looks at all the little tins and the books and everything. But we find the bonds, we give them to Dutch, and then he gives you your first choice for like the honour system.
Oh yeah, because what's worth noting is that some guys on the train, and you have a little negotiation with them going, we can do this one of two ways, you can come out peacefully. So you end up blowing the door open, the guys tumble out, and your posse put them to the side and kind of hold them up with guns. But after you've got the bonds and done all your stuff, you were given a choice of, it's up to you, what do you want to do with these guys? So the choice then is, you can shoot them, you can let them run free.
You can put them back on the train.
Yeah, put them back on the train. And, this sets up the tone, I guess, of how you want to play things. And you're judging, I guess, really, I could let them go. Is there a risk of them reporting what we've done? Or, do I trust them to be scared and just to run away? There's a lot more to talk about in terms of, I guess, how meaningful this kind of system is and what it is. But, this is your first example of that choice.
Yeah, and that was basically that first mission that we got to play, that ended there. And then we were transported to the open world, which was still very early on in the game. We were out of the mountains now. We're in the heartlands.
Yes.
And this is when the whole game opens up. So you get full roam of the whole map. In the first section, the first sort of 1 to 2 hours where you get, I guess, the bit in Blackwater and then the bit in the mountains, the map is locked to those certain sections that you can play. But after you get to this section, the whole world is open for you to go and do what you want. Now the map is covered in like the fog of war system, so you can only see the bits that you've been to. So we only got to see the heartlands basically on our map. So we can't actually say where everything is in relation to everything else, but we can give you a pretty good sense of where things were in the bit that we played. So in the heartlands, we were probably looking north. The mountains that we were just on doing the train robbery and everything were up in the distance, and we could see them.
Yeah.
And we were actually told that they are there, and if you want, you can go back up there right now.
Yeah.
but they looked a long way away.
Oh, yeah, wow. Yeah, on a horse as well. You're not flying there, right? So it's a long distance.
We had the Cornwall plant to the right of us.
Yeah, now, the guy whose train we hijacked is Leviticus Cornwall, I believe. I might be saying or spelling that wrong. But it's clear that this organisation, or the character who owns the organisation, is, as far as we know up front, kind of like the big bad, or, the organisation you rail against. Excuse the pun there. And you get to see the mining organisation, or the oil mine, I think.
Yeah, he seems to have a lot of different businesses around. There's this one we've seen in screenshots that he's got his name on the front of the tram car in one of the more built-up cities. So he seems to be the one that's sort of progressing everyone into this new industrial revolution. He's doing all the oil and he's doing all the new technology stuff. So there's obviously going to be a bit of beef with him. But we were just basically then told you can do what you want, like wander off, explore, have a little look around. And this was when we discovered that the entire game can be played in first person.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, that's something I almost forgot. It's so amazing. Will I personally use it? I doubt it. But it's amazing. It's amazing for viewing landscapes, weather. It almost makes the game feel like a Skyrim or a Far Cry game in terms of that sort of first-person survivalist feel. You can also ride a horse in first person and the horse's head will bobble in front of you. Rockstar being Rockstar, you're not committed to play the game entirely in first person. You can play horse in first person, combat in third person, or vice versa. And you can swap and optimize these parts as you want them.
Well, you've mentioned the horse. Horse is obviously a massive part of the game. Let's talk a little bit more about the horse. We know from previous trailers and things you've got to have a good bond with your horse, and that's very prevalent in this. Our horse, I think, was a Tennessee Walker. That was the breed of horse.
Yep.
And you can lead them around to increase your bond with them. You can hitch them to posts to build stamina if they're tired. If you're sitting on it, you can give him a little pat and encourage him, which will further increase your bond. And if you get up to like the maximum bond, you can do some special techniques, like even dressage. You can make him do little dances in the wilderness if you want.
Like strafing almost, and little side-to-side steps like they do in the dressage competitions. You cannot overstate how analogous the horse is to an actual car, to the point where each horse has a health and stamina rating. It also has a handling rating, like it was a car. Now, I guess what's not like a car is you have a bond which actually increases your ability to control the horse. So if your horse and you are very bonded and your horse is attacked by a predator, like a coyote or wolves or something, or a bear, it's less likely to be flustered. If you are in a gunfight, it's less likely to toss you off or to create trouble. Or if you go past fire, and we did actually see this happen. If your horse is surrounded by flames, some horses get scared and they'll whinny and rear up. But if you've got a really good bond between your horse, that won't happen.
And also having a great bond means that your whistle extends a further reach.
It's a greater radar for your whistle radar, which is very similar to anyone who's played Zelda will appreciate how that works. But the customization options for the horse are staggering.
Oh, so many different things.
Staggering.
Its mane, you can plait it, you can give it a mohawk, you can make it loads of different colours, you can have it a side parting, you can give its tail dreadlocks, you can put different saddles on it, you can put different tack on it, which then can be different colours. There's so many different things.
And it's like a mobile armoury as well. So when you park the horse down, you can put your rifle in its saddlebags. Physically, you see him do it. You can do the same with the bow. Then you can use the horse as a transport mechanism. So if you kill someone and you want to return to another location, you can do that. If you skin a large animal like a bear, you physically place its hide on the back of the horse. Even more amazingly, the hide will leave blood marks on the horse. This is the level of detail. It's breathtaking.
And what's also amazing is, say you go out and you capture someone and you need to take them back to the sheriff. You can tie them up, put them on the back of your horse. But if then you have to go through some deep water and the horse has to trample through it, if it's too deep, the guy on the back of your horse will actually drown, because he'll get trapped under the water and your horse won't be able to keep him up. So he'll either drown. If you've got a pelt, it'll get washed away. if your horse takes a big tumble, it'll probably fall off the back of the horse. And in fact, our horse did take a big tumble. And I think the key thing to note here is that if your horse dies, your horse is dead. That's the end. Like, you might have built up this great, 5-star bond with your horse, but if you chuck it off a cliff or it gets shot in a shootout and you don't have any things to patch it up again, that's the end of the horse. You just have to go and buy another one.
You've really got to take care of them. So you can it's not quite immediately game over. So when our horse went over a ridiculously large ledge, we were reckless and the horse fell and, looked almost lame. You can find these like horse revival tonics, which you can use to revive your horse. We were lucky we had one. If we didn't have one, it is possible technically to mark the map, go back to a nearby village, buy some stuff, and then go back to your horse, provided they haven't dropped dead in the interim. Yeah. But that is definitely a thing you can do. And it's worth doing. You've got to care for your horse because you can find a better horse technically with more health, stamina, and better handling. But if your bond is low, it's simply not as effective a horse.
Yeah, because I did get on a horse that I had not bonded with. I just bought one from the stable and went out on it, immediately got into a gunfight, and then it just ran away. Like, no amount of whistling was bringing that horse back. So it's definitely worth having a strong bond with it, and it's going to really affect how you play the game.
And again, it's not like Zelda Breath of the Wild where there was literally a horse fairy who would bring horses back from the deed. That's not happening that I'm aware of in this game. So take care. As in real life, take care of your horse.
Yeah. So that's horses. Let's talk about some of the other animals in the game. Now, in this open world section that we had, you went on numerous hunting missions, but hunting is going to play a big part in this because you have to hunt for food, you have to supply your camp, which we'll talk about later, with food and pelts to make new clothing and weapons and items and things like that. But the hunting is really good, but also quite brutal.
Very brutal. There's lots of different ways to approach hunting. I think you can go on like a very deliberate hunt for specific types of animal to add to your compendium, or because you need their skins or hides or some materials from them to craft something else or to do something else. There's that entire aspect to it. There's the accidental hunting where you'll run past, like we did, a load of coyotes, and you might decide that you want to kill some of them, or deer I think we had. So you can pop into Deadeye mode, and from that point I think you can tag the deer and you study them, and then you can go into a very formal tracking mode where you have like a timed window of tracking where you can follow them. But when you're in Deadeye, you can also see the trail of the animal, so you can actually follow them and sneak up on them. The best thing to do, we found, was to equip the bow and arrow. So we had some deer flash past us, which went up over a mountain top, and we thought we'd lost them. So I walked up to the top of the mountain, and looking down, you could see that they're there and had calmed down. So I went into Deadeye, corked out the bow, and one bolting headshot, and the deer's down immediately. But I shot the other deer, didn't kill it immediately, and that one actually ran away, but bleeding, leaving a trail that you can then follow. But when you go down to the deer then, you can skin it. Now, Rockstar haven't held back with the skinning.
It does not cut away.
So you see a guy stick a knife through the guts of the horse, slice him open, and then he literally peels off the skin, and you can see all the flesh and all the stuff underneath. It's not grotesque, but you do recoil a little bit. It is like, ugh. And even more so, there's an amazing bit later on where we accidentally trod on a rabbit. And again, that's actually a thing that the game recognises, that you get a recognition for accidentally trampling on 5 rabbits.
Yeah. With a horse. Not with your boot.
Yeah, not in life. That would be really savage. But then when you skin the rabbit, he doesn't do it with a knife. He takes the bottom off with the knife, but then he just peels it whoop,
just with one hand.
Like he's pulling a sock off his feet or something. So it's just it's just these little touches. It's funny and also quite brutal.
Yeah, and also we managed to, I think one of the deers injure it, and when you track it, you can get up to the deer, but it's not actually dead.
Oh yeah, that was
so
horrible.
It's there just rolling around on the floor screaming in pain, and you're just oh wow, it's not actually dead. And then you have to
you have to stick it.
Stick a knife in it to
for
finish
a mercy
it off.
kill. But again, that's horrible because it really is whimpering. It looks really sad. So you want to do the right thing.
So we finished up a little hunting exercise by, skinning the animals and trampling on some rabbits, and then went for a little bit more of an explore around the Heartlands and came across one of these optional stranger missions. Now, if you've played the GTA games in the past, you'll know how the stranger missions work. You just find random NPCs in the world and they give you a special task to go and do something. The lady we came across was an archaeologist, and the mission was called a test of fate.
Paleontologist.
Oh, sorry. The dinosaur lady.
Yes.
The paleontologist is called a test of faith, and she was digging up some dinosaur bones. And she was basically saying this land used to be a shallow river, and it had loads of different creatures in it. And one creature I've heard of could fly and go on land and swim. It was like a mega creature that she was looking for. She's like, can you help me find all these dinosaur bones? And when you do, you either tell me where they are or send me a note and let me know where these dinosaur bones are, and I'll go and find them. And then this marker came up: 0 out of 30 dinosaur bones found. They're not marked on the map, as far as we know. They're just out there in the world for you to go and roam around and discover, and then send back to her to complete. I imagine. Well, I'm speculating now, but maybe if you send all the dinosaur bones up, she puts them together and makes a giant dinosaur construction somewhere in the world that you can go and look at.
I think that's completely possible. You'll also get rewarded for it. They didn't really say what. She just said, I'll reward you handsomely for your time. I'll throw this mad piece of speculation out there related to Red Dead Online, which is an entirely separate conversation. I wonder if, in the way that they did zombies, a complete detachment from reality with the last Red Dead Online, imagine if Red Dead Online let you form groups and effectively replicate Monster Hunter World, where the dinosaur you'd found was like a live thing that had to be hunted. How cool would that be? Hey, Rockstar, if you haven't started that already, I will claim low royalties for that, because you could use Red Dead as a platform to attack a lot of other games in the world. If the Battle Royale thing is true, they're having a go at Fortnite, they could have a go at Monster Hunter World if they went down that path and they tried to link the lore up. I might be talking total rubbish. Sorry, I digress.
Well, hey, it's a theory. We'll put it out there as a theory. So yeah, we didn't actually find any other dinosaur bones. She went riding off on her car and just said, hey, let me know if you find them. And then you were left to your own devices again. Eventually, we made our way to Valentine, which is a small town that we've seen in screenshots and trailers before. It's one of the most featured towns in the trailers. It's basically one street where you've got a saloon, a sheriff's office, a hotel, a couple of other little shops and establishments around, and a church at one end.
Yep.
And this was where we went in and needed to get a bit cleaned up. We'd been walking around for quite a long time. We were pretty tired. Also, you physically look tired if you haven't slept.
Yeah, he looked really haggard, didn't he? Really sad. I got quite upset about it because I like the idea of having a fine dandy cowboy, really outstanding. So I forced James to go to the hairdressers. Yep. This is a bit later on, but I forced him to go to the hairdressers, put pomade in his hair to make it lustrous, and then I got obscenely fussy about the level of waxiness and curliness of the moustache. We went for quite a butch construction at the end. But when your character emerges from the hairdressers, and each thing's cost different amounts and you can tweak, and what was interesting as well is because the hair growth of the beard and your hair is literally organic.
Yeah.
You can't suddenly have long hair because your character, like real life, you can't go from fully shaved to having a beard because you've got to wait for it to grow again. So when you are customizing your beard, you have to think about it strategically.
Yeah, how much of this do I actually want to cut off?
Yeah.
And I guess this relates to the time setting that the game is in, because beard growth occurs over time, your hair grows over time, buildings get constructed over time. There was a couple that we saw in Valentine that were in the process of being made. We don't know how long that time period is, but hey, we're talking about people's beards growing, and that doesn't take place over a matter of hours and days. No. I think you're looking at weeks and months.
At minimums, that's weeks. There's probably a much bigger conversation about how significant time is in Red Dead Redemption 2. I suspect, actually, hugely. It could be that the game, spans months, but actually perhaps even years. and it might be quite a number of years. And for those people who played the original Red Dead, they'll be aware of how time is used as a very powerful tool in that game. You've got to think from Rockstar's perspective, how do they top and match that? I'll actually come back round to this at the end of our chat, because I think there's a thematic link here that would be amazing if they pulled it off.
Yeah, and there is a big emphasis on time and dates and things. Like you say, when you press down on the D-pad and it brings up your honor bar, it also brings up at the top a section that says where you are, but also what temperature it is, what time it is, what day it is. In Valentine, there was a guy selling a newspaper that you can buy every day that has like new stories in it, and actually the stories in it that we saw related to the story missions that we had done. So that would be like,
yeah, there was
updated.
a report on the dinosaur paleontologist lady.
Yeah.
She was in there. The battles you'd been in appear in there. You can flip the newspaper, you can zoom in, you can read it. Everything in the game is like this, that level of detail.
Yeah, it's incredible. But then after the barbers, we went to the hotel. Now, I went to the hotel just to get a little rest, okay? But also, there's an option to have a bath and clean yourself up a little bit. So, I mean, why not? You've got to go in and have a lovely bath.
We were physically dirty, and the streets of Valentine, also worth noting, there's no concrete. It's filthy. It's filthy streaked mud, and you can see it, and you can see the rutting. You see your footprints affect the rutting. You can see water settling within the ruts of the street. Your character looks stinking dirty when he's walking through it.
Yeah, and actually, when we turned up there in this dirty, muddy town, the saloon that we wanted to go in was shut because of an action that had previously happened in the game. Now, that action turned out to be the thing that we can see in the trailers when you get thrown out of the window of the saloon and have a little fight outside. So when we came back, the saloon was shut because we had caused a ruckus.
But then actually, this is skipping around a little bit. There was later in the game where we went back to the saloon when it had reopened, and the bartender remembers you, and he's sort of talking about not wanting trouble, and you were that guy who got thrown through the window.
Yeah, and you had to be like, oh, sorry.
And it was the same when we go to the hotel, and the hotel owner again says, don't give me any trouble, we know that thing happened, and you can de-escalate the conversation like you can with everything. Good grief, there's so much to talk about, James. We haven't talked about escalating the conversations. And, we decided, hey, we're not here for trouble, we're here for a wash.
Yes.
So let's talk about the wash.
So you go up into the room, you get in your lovely bubble bath. It's a bit like Geralt in the opening of The Witcher.
Yeah.
Like he's there in his lovely bath, he's having a nice relax. And then suddenly there's like a little knock at the door, and a lady's voice says, oh, do you like any help in there? And obviously you say yes, because who doesn't want a lovely scrub down? So she comes in and she starts rubbing your head and your arms and things, and you can talk to her as you're going, saying like, I think there was a line that's saying when Arthur Morgan says, I used to have baths with my dog, but now you're here, so it's fine. And then as the conversation carries on and you're like, oh yeah, need to rub my leg and my arm, she reaches down into the bath and cleans you up all nice.
Yeah, probably to find the soap or something.
Yeah.
Look, let's be clear. This is not hot coffee. It's not that explicit.
It's under the bubbles.
It's all a bit nudge wink, but definitely your lead character derives some pleasure from being cleaned.
You do get a lovely health boost.
Yeah, he does say that, like, my health is fully restored. So there we go. And you can choose which area gets a scrub. And it's only arm or leg, get your mind out of the gutter, fools. So it's another example of the depth, and I think an acknowledgement of, this world is, who knows what kind of delights or otherwise this world holds in store. Yeah.
And then you have a little sleep. And when you're going to have a little sleep, you do get the options of how much time you want to progress. And I think it's something like 4, 12, or 8 hours.
It's sort of like you can have 6, 12, or 18 hours. What that essentially does is allow you to teleport to different times of the day. So you can start in the morning, you can start in early evening, or you can choose to wake up at night time. So it broadly throws you into the 3 most defined weather/lighting conditions.
Yeah.
And again, there's probably advantages to, we're infiltrating this camp, it's nighttime, that makes sense. It's mid-morning, we've got a long journey ahead of us, we want to go in the morning. All these types of things. Plus, you need to advance time sometimes to allow the world to actually repair itself.
Yeah.
Or for people to forget some of the stuff you did. And often, because also worth noting, because your actions have follow through, there's a fear that, oh my God, and I thought actually, because I think James went into, or one of our colleagues went into Valentine, killed so many people, the entire town chased us out with pitchforks and guns, and we died.
Did have like a $200 bounty.
Yeah, in real life, you could never ever go back to that town. Now, what happens is you can go back, but everyone's super wary of you and is warning you. But to get things a bit more right again, you have to go and literally pay the bounty, and that gives you sort of like a reset, but not a memory reset. But it means that you won't be barred from ever visiting a village again because you blew up the salon, saloon or something.
And that was one of the interesting things when we went to pay the bounty, which we did at the train station / post office. There was another option there to say, oh, you can send and receive letters here. And we were like, oh, what's that? And we didn't really get a clear answer on it. It was like, yeah, what is that? What could you do by sending and receiving letters? Now, maybe it's related to the dinosaur lady, and you can send her a letter to say, I've found some bones here. But also, I mean, why would you need to send letters to anyone? Probably to people in your camp to let them know everything's all right.
Yeah, I don't know who delivers the post to a camp in the middle of the Rockies or something. This again feels like it ties to where I want to go thematically, but you deliver letters because it's too large a distance for you to cover yourself. So that hints at the scale of the game. It also says who is so significant in the world that you would want to send them letters. Usually that's family or loved ones. So what does that mean for the nature of the game? This is an entirely different conversation, but it was interesting that was one of the moments where were Rockstar to have a collective eyebrow, it was definitely raised. Let's see where that goes.
Yeah. The last thing we did in Valentine was do a bounty, which we got from the sheriff's office. That bounty was called Good Honest Snake Oil, and we had to go and find this guy out on a cliff top who was selling medicines to people.
Literally selling snake oil. So going into towns, telling people it was a miracle cure, and it obviously poisons them and it's really bad. So you go out to find him, you ride out of town, it's not that far, you follow a winding track down to like a river / brook, which has like a cliffside. You walk or ride your horse up to the cliffside, and this guy is hiding there. This guy's very intrepid, and then all you do all the way through the game, you hold L2 to target someone. Now it doesn't just mean target them with your gun, you target them with a selection of things. So you hold the L2 button, and then you can press square, which is usually your more friendly option, which is greet, and then you have circle, which is more like interrogate, antagonize. So you've always got this option to kind of gear up or gear down a conversation. They usually go in one of two ways. One is you walk away and things are cool. Two is you shoot the guy or kill him. So maybe that conversation decision tree isn't as complex as you might expect it to be, but let's cut Rockstar some slack here. You cannot expect a deep, heavy rain style interaction with 5 million NPCs in a world the size of all of America. There's no console or development team in the world who could create that actual reality illusion. But what is nice about it is if you accidentally stumble into trouble, you can just turn down the gears and make it a non-combat situation. I think that's really nice. And it also creates lovely little organic interchanges of conversation which build character and affect your honour bar. In this example, you basically know you need to take this guy in, so you approach him and confront him. But your character is canny enough because the guy goes, oh, I don't know that guy. I don't know who you're talking about. So he says, oh, you got to help me. My mama's really sick, or my granny's really sick. If only you knew of some way I could revive them with some kind of elixir or potion. So the guy goes, oh, I'm a medical man. Of course I can help you. And then he whips out the snake oil. And at that point, he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
So at which point, you whip out your shooter and go, right, you're coming with me. And as he's having this conversation, the camera's sort of panned out. You can see the guy edging backwards onto the ravine, about to fall into the river. And you need to take him back alive. So you definitely don't want him to die. He, surprise, falls off, and you have two attempts at yanking him up, just like you did with the guy on the train. After you've done that, I think essentially he ends up jumping back in or falls in.
He definitely doesn't want to be taken to that sheriff's office.
So he jumps into the river. Then your horse, thankfully, if you haven't got it with you already, arrives. You have to ride along the side of the ravine as he gets blown down this big, gusty ravine on the not like a waterfall, but rapids.
It's like rapid,
Yeah, rapids. And you chase down the valley and you're jogging alongside him, and you have to follow him for quite a distance, and at which point you have to retrieve him from the rapids by swinging your lasso.
Yeah.
So you have your lasso out, you hold L2 to target him, and I think it's R1 or maybe R2 to spin it round, lop it round his body, and you can drag him out of the rapids to the side. When you got him out, then you can hog tie him. And you hog tie him up, and then you can honk him on your horse. Also worth noting, when you hog tie him, you have the option to stick him straight on the horse, or for the added indignity, you can loot him.
Yeah.
And I did loot him, and he reacts to it. And this is what's so great. He goes, "Oh, as if it wasn't enough, have you not made me suffer enough?" So you stick him on the back of the horse, and you ride him back into town. He's yammering away, talking about how he's innocent and a man of, medicine and all this nonsense. So you can press, I think, circle, and you can clonk him on the head.
Give him a little whack.
And again, the game recognises that. So when he wakes up, when you're getting close to the town, you can whack him again, or he starts going, "I don't know what's wrong with me, I kept blacking out there." It's all this level of immersion and detail, so fabulous. And then you end up taking him back to the sheriffs, and they're your classic sort of shady-looking two guys chewing, tobacco, staring at each other. You end up slinging him in the cells. You'll get rewarded for that.
Yeah, I think it was $50 we got for bringing him back, which doesn't sound like a lot, but all of the money in Red Dead 2 is like, it feels like it's not a lot, but because back then, in the very early 1900s, like we were not going to get thousands of pounds.
Oh yeah, like when you go to the general store, items are sort of range from about 25 cents to about $3 top end, so things aren't that expensive. The store, you can pick items organically off the shelf. There's even like a beautiful old-time catalogue where you've got all
the same
these...
one you get for the collector's edition.
Oh, it's so good. And you can see every item in the game which you could purchase. The bounty system, when you're bad, your bounty increases, which makes people want to chase you more and more. I initially looked at that and went, "Oh my goodness, our bounty's huge. It's up to $15,000. Rockstar corrected me and went, "No, that's $15, like 15.00.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh. And I think the record they'd seen is something like $280. And that was for someone who like literally robbed a train and burnt something down. And we got up to about 200-ish when we went on a murder spree in some...
in the town.
But we killed a lot of people to get to that. So the money's involved. They're modest. And actually, it's a nice change from GTA Online, where everything is like a gazillion billion. And it gets quite confusing. This felt much more, condensed.
Okay, so that's the end of the open world and the Heartlands area. Amazingly, there's still two more things to talk about.
Good grief.
Then we went to the camp. Which is the first camp that you get to in the game after coming out of the mountains. It's called Horseshoe Overlook, and this is where you interact with all of your camp buddies. So we got there, everyone's there. Dutch is there, Pearson, the chef, is there asking, have you brought me any food this time? And you're like, no, but I know why you're asking. It's because you're not cooking, and when you're not cooking, it means you need meat, and I haven't got any meat for you. And this is where you can upgrade your camp. You can bring stuff back to the camp, like little trinkets that you found. You can donate money to the camp so everyone's a bit happier, and they can bring in different food and supplies. If you treat your camp really well, you'll find like health potions and ammo scattered around, so you don't have to go and buy it from the shop. But none of this is like essential. If you don't want to do any of the camp management stuff, you don't have to. But if you do, there are some benefits.
Yeah, what you invest is what you get back in terms of things that help you play the game. Rockstar aren't going to lock anything out for those people who just don't want to commit to camp management. Because I think there were fears that the game would be like almost like Sim City or something similar to that. That's not the case at all. But you can, if you want, really invest in the cosmetic enhancement of your tent. Like I saw options for different luxury furs in your tent and expansions, and all of this stuff is so deep. All the customization is so deep, but you don't have to go there.
No, and actually, if you do spend the time there to upgrade, like Arthur's tent, in the higher levels of that upgrade, it becomes a fast travel point.
Yes,
so you can actually then fast travel back to your camp, which is a big bonus, because if you're not fast traveling there, you have to physically ride back to it. And you could be who knows where, in the middle of nowhere. So the camp's basically like the hub of where you can sit around. If you donate a lot of money and resources to it. You might come back and everyone's having a little party and a drink, and they're inviting you to go and have a good time with them. You can sit around the campfire if you want. People will come and join you, tell stories about what they've been doing. You can tell them what you've been up to. Like, it's a lovely dynamic place to be and feel part of like the crew and your family. Like, that's nice. And it's also where you can pick up some missions, which is the final bit that we got to. There's a guy in the camp that had been kidnapped called Kieran.
Yeah.
Now, he was allegedly one of the O'Driscoll gang, and the O'Driscolls are something that Dutch has a big sort of blood feud with. There's quite a lot of gangs in the game, but the O'Driscolls is the one that we saw the most of.
Yeah.
So he's tied up to a pole. There's a hint that he might get castrated if he doesn't tell us what he needs.
Yeah, I think Bill pulls a glowing red hot pair of pliers out of the fire and briefly threatens to castrate this guy. Surprise, surprise, he very quickly complies with telling you the location of his superiors.
Yeah, so he's like, I'll go and show you where their camp is. And off you go. You and Arthur go off with a couple of... Arthur goes off with a couple of other members of the gang.
Yeah.
And you head up to a place. You head up to 6 Point Cabin.
Yeah.
Which is where he says the leaders of the gang are. And this is where you get another choice of what you want to do. You can go in all guns blazing, but the suggestion is maybe we should do this one a bit stealthy.
Yeah, so it's similar, I think, to certain moments in GTA missions where what you can do is you can tell your colleagues, either you deal with the situation yourself, or you can use the L2 instruction thing. You press L2 and point it at your co-op teammates or AI teammates and say to them, you deal with it. And what they will do then is like run in and stick a knife in someone's neck, or they'll run in and hit them with a bow and arrow, and you can decide how it's done. And there's bits where the classic thing of one guy on his own, you take him out, put him out of the way, two guards stood side by side with their backs with you, I'll take the left one, you take the right one, arrow to the head, done. There's a scene where later on there's a guy on a bench, and as the old guy slits his throat, the other guy commentates on, oh my god, it's so brutal, like commenting on your own teammate being so brutal. So effectively we worked our way into the inner heart of the camp, and this is denoted on the mini-map by sort of a red glow or corona around the area where the enemies are. When you get right into the heart of the camp, it's pretty obvious you can't go stealthy anymore. So the minute you get spotted, the rifles are out, and what ensues is like a campsite, you're hiding behind logs, you're hiding behind like rickshaws, all these kind of different things, and there's just a big shootout, and there's lots of Deadeye being used, but it's not too challenging, maybe because Rockstar kept boosting our energy to make it feel like it wasn't, but we did get it done. I think if you're a procedural, you would get it done. You can, like all the games, you can take cover, you can do combat rolls, you can dive, you can take tonics mid-battle to recover yourself. I think if you're careful, you could manage it quite well.
Yeah, the diving's actually very similar to like the Max Payne 3 slow-mo dive that you can do. You go into Deadeye and you can dive, and you can shoot someone. Throughout all of this massive gunfight, the whole of your party is like constantly talking, so you can hear them be like, oh my god, there's a guy over here, there's a guy shooting over here, oh, why are you not shooting him properly? Like, there's loads of chatter going on, which really adds to the atmosphere and what's happening. Like, it's not just your guys either, it's like the other guys. It's really loud, like there's gunfire, there's loads of shouting. It's pretty impressive. And eventually everyone is dead, and then Kieran's like, oh, this is where I think they store the gold. It's in this little shack. You've got to go in and investigate. I think they've hidden it in the fireplace.
Yeah.
And you go in there, and then a guy bursts out and like knocks you backwards.
Yes.
Just as you're about to get shot in the face, it's actually Kieran who shoots him as a show of loyalty, to be like, see, I've helped you out. I'm not one of those guys. I was just along for the ride. And then you actually recruit him into your camp. Yeah,
like your other allies, they say, your character says, you can run now, go Kieran, we don't want you anymore. And he goes, I can't run away, I can't go back to that gang, I'm going to die. I'm one of you now, I've got to be with you. So that reluctantly he agrees. So it looks like that's kind of the introduction of that character to your gang. I guess what it sets up, and we'll see where this goes in the game, is, can he truly be trusted?
Yeah. Is he a mega spy?
Yeah. Is there an enemy within, or is he actually a good guy? And that's very early doors. So I think the layering of these types of subplots will make the game more and more intriguing as you go on.
And that is where the demo ended. There's so much that we haven't delved into that much, or even talked about. For instance, plucking things out of the air. The horse can swim in the water. Arthur Morgan can also swim, but not super well, so he can't dive underwater, but he can swim on the surface. Before we go, Dan, you wanted to talk about the theme of Red Dead 2 and what you think it means.
This is important for me, and I think it will be for other people. Something I've always liked about GTA is because it's contemporary, there is an element of comment on society in the game. And in a very overt way, you get that from parody, where you get parodies of real-world objects, advertising, radio shows and things you recognise, which intrinsically gives GTA, if not entirely a political aspect, definitely a twisted mirror view of reality as we know it. And I think it creates a degree of comment and interest around the game. My fear with Red Dead was, because it's set 130, 40, 50 years ago, it just doesn't feel like a world that's as relevant. What are they going to say that feels as true today? Does the game have a more weighty underpin that resonates in terms of theme or nature of humanity? And I asked Rockstar this directly, and this is not an answer officially on behalf of all of Rockstar. We've got to stress, and maybe more my interpretation of the answers Rockstar representatives gave back to us. But something they had stressed was, this is really the story of modern America. We're talking the end of the outlaw era in the 1900s and the birth of the industrial age as we know it. Now, what you were seeing is the transition from what America is in terms of the way people perceive it, and even today into these troubled, crazy world we're in, where there seems to be this existential battle for the soul of America, of what it is to be American. What are true American values? Is it about nationalism and protecting our country? Is it about inclusion and multiculturalism? Is it all of these things embedded? Is it about embracing technology or a retreat to the past? There's these tensions right now in modern America, and actually by taking it back 150 years to almost the inception of the modern age, you're casting a lens on some of the biggest political debates of our day. And this isn't just me fantasizing. You do get to see the world literally being built, like we talked about. So this is where I think the time aspect is so significant. We also know there are cities in the game, for example, St. Denis, which is in the New Orleans style area in the deep south. Now, from the glimpses we've seen of that, it's huge. And that area is also deeply multicultural. It would, in the same way America today is rife, not rife with racism, maybe less than it was, but you cannot deny it's an issue. I'm convinced Red Dead will start to explore these themes of immigration and the bigger senses of the new world encroaching on these old beliefs. And my actual sense is, when you glimpse the bigger settlements in Red Dead, you almost feel not embarrassed, but like the old way of life feels absurd.
Like the
living in tents, the cowboys, their code, this sort of being completely untethered from a bigger internationalized world, it makes cowboys feel ridiculous, romanticized but ridiculous. And I think this tension will be the underpin of the entire game and give it its thematic heft. And I actually think it might be a very clever way for Rockstar to offer a degree of comment on what it is to be an American. And I think you think of what people today, you think of the debates about gun laws and the NRA and all these different things. A lot of it comes down to beliefs in the Constitution, right? Where did those beliefs come from? They came from a much wilder, more lawless world that needed these kind of rules. What does it look like when those rules no longer feel relevant? What are the decisions humans make sensibly to live in this world? And this is where I wonder, will your lead character start to doubt the very nature of his own cowboy existence? And then that would invite the player to question the nature of his beliefs on what it is to be an American. And I think this is where the game could be. Rockstar may never overtly ever say this. I think this is a fascinating lens to view what is a very turbulent time in global politics.
And the fact that you mentioned yesterday that wouldn't it be lovely if at some stage someone just mentions off the cuff, hey, I've heard they're setting up this new city called Liberty City somewhere.
Yeah, I think this might be me putting 2 and 2 together to make 6. That given that GTA Online deliberately threw back to Red Dead with the inclusion of the antique weapon parts, Rockstar have created a bridge between those worlds. Now, you could get away with it by saying, GTA Online's kind of like not real and Red Dead Online is separate and they're not part of the canon universe. I just think by starting that conversation, Rockstar are building a road between Red Dead and GTA. And you also think, let's say there's a Red Dead 3, where does it go? You can't, I don't think, make another cowboy game covering the period between the late 1800s and, like, let's say 1914-ish when Red Dead steps off. You've covered all the turf. You've exhausted all the things to... You might know, right, there's other stories to tell, but thematically you're operating in the same era, right? But I wonder if they could start now sowing the seeds of, this guy who's doubting what it is to be a cowboy might have heard that, hey, out east they're building a new town. What's it called? Liberty City. How thrilling would that be? Or to have a character name who resonates and he's someone from the game.
Yeah, or even like a surname that's
just a surname. I'm not. My craziest theory is there's going to be almost like a Battlestar Galactica style time leap of not just months and years, but like a large period of time. But like, if it happened, it would only, I think, be for like a tiny section.
Yeah, like at the end.
Yeah, like a tiny section. That's me fantasizing. Don't hold me to account on that. But I do think there's definitely an opportunity for them to create that bridge, because then as a thematic sweep, Red Dead is a companion piece in a very real way to GTA.
Okay. Well, while you're fantasizing, very quickly, that I forgot to do just now, was we haven't talked about the start of the game. Now, the start of the game, obviously, we know takes place in Blackwater, and it's the heist that's gone wrong.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that Rockstar seem again to be choosing this big, dramatic opening where a heist has gone wrong and the gang are all a bit het up and need to like go away and lick their wounds a little bit, and that's what happened in GTA 5 at the very beginning. We saw Michael and Trevor and Franklin do the big heist, and now in Red Dead 2 there also seems to be a big heist, for want of a better word, that has gone wrong, and you're off into the mountains and you have to regroup and re-establish yourselves. Now, I guess the interesting thing is, why haven't we seen that heist? Now, some of it will be because it's probably quite impactful and it's a really nice set piece that they don't want to have spoiled by anyone until everyone gets to play it. But is there something in that beginning section that is quite a big twist that no one has seen coming? Like, for instance, do you play as a different character who maybe gets killed in that heist and you'll start getting referenced throughout the story and that's the thing? Or do you play as someone else? Could you control Dutch in that section? Like, who knows?
I don't know. What I do think is you're right. North Yankton, that opening section of GTA 5, was kept a secret. No one has seen that location. Whilst we on the show had speculated that might be a good way to intro it, they hadn't shown it in media. Now, if they've openly shown their hand on the game starts with a heist gone wrong, it's a bit too obvious. It's a repeat of what they've done. I just wonder, and again, this is purely speculation, could they pull another rug from under our feet and go, here's an opening section of something completely unexpected? And one criticism you could make of Red Dead is, once again, Rockstar are presenting what looks like a very male-centric version of the universe. You play as a rugged cowboy man who takes baths and has his left knee rubbed. It's very male-centric. I wonder if they'll take the opportunity to introduce surprise playable characters. Could it even be someone like Abigail Marsden or something different? Or could the game actually, given that it's got such a span of time and geography, allow you to play with multiple characters? We don't know, but I wouldn't rule out this kind of rug pull. And it's, that's exciting. And I cannot overstate, despite all of that speculation, there's enough that we know is real to make the prospect of this game mind-blowing.
Okay, well, let's leave it there for now until tomorrow. As we say, if you've got any questions, put them in the comments below. Thank you for listening to this show. We really like seeing the game. Obviously, it's amazing. I hope we managed to get across some of the aspects that we were really excited about. Really excited to talk more about it. So let us know your comments. Get in touch on Twitter at RedDead2o'clock. put your comments below, and we will see you all tomorrow.